Diary of a Geek has put together a list of the most ruthless leaders of all time, featuring men and women who employed merciless tactics to achieve their political and military agenda. Deaths considered in this countdown are those that occurred during the regime of these leaders, including those from mass executions, disastrous economic or food policies and war. Opening this countdown and coming in at number 10 is General Yakubu Gowon. Country, Nigeria. Reign, 1966 to 1975. Number of deaths, 1.1 million. On May 30, 1967, the eastern region of Nigeria declared a formal secession from Nigeria, which was now to be known as the Republic of Biafra. This was to trigger a war that would last some 30 months, and see the deaths of more than 100,000 soldiers and over 1 million civilians. Most of the latter of which would perish of starvation under a Nigeria-imposed blockade. The war saw a massive expansion of the Nigerian army in size and a steep increase in its doctrinal and technical sophistication, while the Nigerian Air Force was essentially born in the course of the conflict. However, significant controversy has surrounded the air operations of the Nigerian forces, as several residents of Biafra, including Red Cross workers, foreign missionaries and journalists, accused the Nigerian Air Force of specifically targeting civilian populations, relief centers and marketplaces. Gowon has steadfastly denied those claims, along with claims that his army committed atrocities such as rape, wholesale executions of civilian populations and extensive looting in occupied areas. However, one of his wartime commanders, Benjamin Adekunle, popularly known as Black Scorpion and easily a most controversial, celebrated and mythologized figure, seems to give some credence to these claims in his book, while excusing them as unfortunate byproducts of war. Clinching the number 9 spot is Mengistu Haile Mariam, who ruled Ethiopia from 1974 until 1991. He came to power by smothering Haile Selassie, the former president. An allegation he has denied. His most notable claim to fame is the Ethiopian Red Terror, a repressive campaign led by Ethiopia's communist militia. Thousands of people were killed and their bodies were discovered dead on the streets. Much of the killing was carried out by the neighborhood watch known as Kabyles. Mengistu has been known to strangle people to death. The campaign has been recognized as one of Africa's deadliest mass massacres. The biggest problem with prosecuting Mengistu for genocide is that his actions did not necessarily target a particular group. They were directed against anybody who was opposing his government, and they were generally much more political than based on any ethnic targeting. Mengistu was sentenced to death, in absentia, by Ethiopia's High Court on May 26, 2008, overturning his previous sentence of life imprisonment. 23 of his most senior aides also received death sentences that were commuted on June 1, 2011. Mengistu has resided in Zimbabwe since 1991. At number 8 is Kim Il-sung. Country, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Reign, 1948 to 1987. Number of deaths, 1.6 million. An absolute communist dictator, he controlled the Democratic People's Republic of Korea from 1948 to 1987. People's activities were so carefully regulated, and those visitors who were permitted in were so tightly supervised, that very little independent information concerning the regime's purges, executions, and concentration and forced labor camps got out of the nation. Nonetheless, via defectors, escapees, spies, Korean War refugees, and analysis of Korean publications and archives, a hazy image of systematic democide develops, similar to that carried out in the early Soviet Union or early Communist China. Between 710,000 to slightly more than 3.5 million individuals have been killed, with a mid-estimate of almost 1.6 million. However, these estimates are only informed estimations. In this situation, Kim's thought control over all of his people and their international and domestic communications has shielded him and his party from all but profound suspicion of committing democide so enormous as to be mega-murder. However, given the character of his society and what has come to light about his purges, labor camps, and executions, there is enough evidence to charge him and his party with a crime against humanity. Number 7 is Pol Pot. Country, Cambodia. Reign, 1976 to 1979. Number of deaths, 1.7 million. Pol Pot was the head of Cambodia's communist movement. He sought to purify the country, and an estimated 1.7 to 2.5 million people died as a result. In the late 1970s, he implemented an intriguing concept known as agrarian collectivization. It essentially required city dwellers to travel to fields to perform labor, and farmers to do the same. As you can expect, and hindsight is 20/20, neither group fared well in their new positions. Paul, on the other hand, did not stop at enslaving his own people. He also starved them, provided insufficient medical attention, and murdered several of them. As a result, about 1/5 of Cambodia's population was killed. At number 6 is Ismail Enver Pasha. Country, Ottoman Empire. Reign, 1914 to 1918. Number of deaths, 2.5 million. Enver Pasha was an Ottoman military commander, revolutionary, and convicted war criminal. He was one of the Ottoman Empire's most prominent leaders. He began his career as a Turkish military commander and Young Turk revolt leader. He eventually came to prominence, leading the Ottoman Empire through the Balkan Wars and World War I. Enver Pasha, as war minister, directed a disastrous attack on Russian soldiers in the Battle of Sarıkamış. His humiliating defeat in the Battle of Sarıkamış required a scapegoat, and he chose to put the blame on the Armenians. He was one of the main perpetrators of the late Ottoman genocides, and is held responsible for the death of between 800,000 and 1.8 million Armenians, 300,000 Assyrians, and 750,000 Greeks. That was the beginning of what is now known as the Armenian Genocide. The word genocide was coined to describe this event. At number 5 is Hideki Tojo. Country, Japan. Reign, 1941 to 1944. Number of deaths, 5 million. Hideki Tojo was an Imperial Japanese Army officer. He served as both Prime Minister and the Army Minister at the same time. When he became Prime Minister in 1941, he witnessed Japan's decision to enter the war, as well as its subsequent conquest of most of Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands. Tojo presided over several war crimes during the war, including the slaughter and starving of civilians and prisoners of war. He was also implicated in the sexual enslavement of thousands of Korean women and girls. During World War II, Japan started winning battles, and the public loved Tojo for it. However, when the tide turned, and he began losing the war, it was devastating. Eventually he went into seclusion. He was tried for war crimes and found guilty of waging wars of aggression, wars in violation of international law, and waging unprovoked war against many countries. Not to mention ordering, authorizing, and permitting inhumane treatment of prisoners of war. Tojo was sentenced to death on November 12, 1948, and executed by hanging 41 days later on December 23, 1948, a week before his 64th birthday. Number 4 is Leopold II of Belgium. Country, Congo. Reign, 1885 to 1908. Number of deaths, 2 to 15 million. Leopold II was the owner and absolute ruler of the Congo Free State, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, from 1885 until 1908. During his reign, millions of Congolese people, including children, were maimed, slaughtered, or died of diseases. He ruled the Congo for personal gain using his private army, force publique. Failure to satisfy rubber-gathering quotas was a capital offense. The force publique was compelled to deliver the hand of their victims as proof when they shot and killed someone. As a result, the rubber quotas were partially paid off in chopped-off hands. Reports of deaths and abuse led to a major international scandal in the early 20th century, and Leopold was forced by the Belgian government to relinquish control of the colony to the civil administration in 1908. At number 3 is Adolf Hitler. Country, Germany. Reign, 1934 to 1945. Number of deaths, 17 million. Adolf Hitler was Germany's undisputed dictator from 1934 to 1945. He also led the Nazi Party. He acquired popularity by espousing ideas such as German nationalism and anti-Semitism. In 1933, Hitler was named Chancellor, launching the Third Reich. Hitler craved power, despised Jews, and sought European hegemony. The militarism required to achieve such a high aim resulted in the commencement of World War II. Nazi troops were responsible for the methodical slaughter of up to 17 million citizens, 6 million of whom were Jews and 1.5 million Romanis. At number 2 is Joseph Stalin. Country, Soviet Union. Reign, 1924 to 1953. Number of deaths, 23 million. Joseph Stalin was the first secretary of the Soviet Communist Party from 1922 to 1953. After Lenin's death in 1924, he was made the leader of the Soviet Union. And almost immediately, he launched a new economy that messed up food production across the country, which eventually led to a massive famine. In Ukraine, this dark period is known as Holodomor. It is widely believed that Soviet policies caused the famine there and was designed as an attack on Ukraine. Estimates on the total number of casualties within Soviet Ukraine range from 2.6 million to 10 million. During the late 1930s, Stalin launched another wonderfully titled initiative called the Great Purge. It was a paranoid campaign to kill off the people who opposed him, and his targets were often executed. In 1939, Stalin agreed to a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. Eventually, Germany violated the pact, the Soviet Union joined the Allies, and they racked up 23.9 million deaths, the largest death toll in the war. Our top spot goes to Mao Zedong, who racked up a death toll of between 49 to 78 million people from 1949 to 1976. Country, China. Reign, 1949 to 1976. Number of deaths, 49 to 78 million. Mao was a Chinese communist leader and founder of the People's Republic of China. He was responsible for the disastrous policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. He was a Chinese revolutionary, political theorist, and communist leader. While controversial, he is still widely considered a savior of the nation. During his first 5 years from 1949 to 1953, he is said to have systematically killed between 4 to 6 million people by sentencing them to die or by sending them to reform through labor camps. He organized mass repressions, established execution quotas, and defended his actions in these early years as necessary for securing power for the People's Republic of China. In 1958, in an attempt to introduce a more Chinese form of communism, Mao launched the Great Leap Forward. This aimed at mass mobilization of labor to improve agricultural and industrial production. The result, instead, was a massive decline in agricultural output, which, together with poor harvests, led to famine and the deaths of millions. The policy was abandoned and Mao's position weakened. The estimates from this program alone are 20 million deaths. In an attempt to reassert his authority, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution in 1966, aiming to purge the country of impure elements and revive the revolutionary spirit. 1.5 million people died and much of the country's cultural heritage was destroyed. His later years saw attempts to build bridges with the United States, Japan, and Europe. In 1972, U.S. President Richard Nixon visited China and met Mao. His policies and political purges from 1949 to 1976 caused the deaths of between 49 to 78 million people. Mao died on September 9, 1976.